how I wish that every heart here today would understand the power of silence, the beauty of focus, and the deep, unshakable peace that comes when we surrender our distractions to God. So many of us spend our lives looking outward, comparing, analyzing, responding to what the world says. But, beloved, listen to me. When we focus too much on others, we lose sight of what God is doing in us. True growth happens in the secret place, away from the eyes of the world, in the quiet moments where God refines, shapes, and strengthens us. In a society that constantly seeks attention, validation, and recognition, the idea of growing in silence may seem strange. However, spiritual and personal transformation does not take place in the spotlight. It happens in solitude, where God does his deepest work in the heart of a believer. The secret place is where faith is strengthened, character is developed, and a deeper intimacy with God is cultivated. Throughout the Bible, we see that the greatest men and women of God were prepared in hidden places before they stepped into their divine assignments. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel out of Egypt. David was anointed as king while still tending sheep in solitude. Even Jesus himself spent time in the wilderness fasting and praying before he began his public ministry. The secret place is where God prepares his people for what is to come. It is where he removes distractions, purifies motives, and builds a foundation that can sustain the calling he has placed on their lives. Growth in the secret place requires stillness and surrender. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." In the stillness, God speaks. He reveals his will, corrects wrong mindsets, and brings clarity to our purpose. But many struggle with being still because they equate silence with inactivity. Yet, the most profound growth happens beneath the surface. Just as a seed must be buried in the soil, hidden from view, before it can sprout and bear fruit, so must a believer go through a season of unseen growth before stepping into their destiny. The secret place is also where intimacy with God is cultivated. It is not enough to simply know about God. True transformation comes from experiencing him personally. Matthew 6:6 says, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." In this place of communion, God strengthens faith, imparts wisdom, and reveals his heart. Those who spend time with God in private will reflect his glory in public. However, true growth in the secret place requires patience. In a world that craves instant results, waiting on God's timing can be difficult, but spiritual maturity is not rushed. Isaiah 40:31 reminds us, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Growth takes time, and the process cannot be skipped. What God is doing in the unseen will be revealed in its appointed time. The greatest transformations do not happen in public. They happen in the hidden place, where no one is watching, but where God is working. Those who embrace the secret place will emerge stronger, wiser, and ready for the purpose God has prepared for them. The unseen process produces lasting fruit, and those who remain faithful in the quiet season will see the reward of their growth in due time. Silence is often misunderstood in a world that values loud voices, quick responses, and constant communication. Many equate silence with weakness, passivity, or a lack of confidence. However, true strength is not found in how much we speak, but in our ability to remain silent when necessary. Silence is not a sign of fear or helplessness. Rather, it is a demonstration of self-control, wisdom, and trust in God. Those who understand the power of silence realize that not every situation requires a reaction, not every battle must be fought with words, and that sometimes the most powerful response is none at all. The Bible teaches that silence is a mark of wisdom. Proverbs 17:27-28 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues." A wise person does not speak just for the sake of being heard. They understand that words have power, and they choose to use them carefully. When we remain silent instead of speaking in haste, we allow God to guide our words and actions. Jesus himself demonstrated the strength of silence. When he stood before his accusers, he did not argue or defend himself. Isaiah 53:7 prophesies of him, saying, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth." Jesus understood that he did not need to justify himself before men. He entrusted his life into the hands of the Father. This is a lesson for every believer. When we are criticized, misunderstood, or falsely accused, we do not always need to respond. Sometimes silence is the greatest expression of trust in God. Silence also allows for spiritual growth. It is in the quiet moments that we can hear God's voice clearly. The world is filled with noise, opinions, distractions, and endless conversations, but God speaks in stillness. In 1 Kings 19:11-12, Elijah expected to hear God in the mighty wind, the earthquake, and the fire, but instead God spoke in a gentle whisper. This teaches us that when we silence the noise around us and within us, we become more sensitive to his voice and direction. Furthermore, silence is a powerful tool for self-control. James 1:19 instructs believers, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." When we remain silent in moments of anger or frustration, we prevent ourselves from saying things we may regret. Silence in these moments is not weakness, it is discipline. It is a refusal to let emotions control our actions. Strength is not always about speaking louder. It is about knowing when to remain silent. Those who master the power of silence gain wisdom, avoid unnecessary conflict, and develop a deeper trust in God. Silence is not a sign of defeat. It is often the key to victory. In a world filled with endless words, opinions, and promises, true impact is made not by what we say, but by what we do. Words can be empty, easily spoken without follow-through, but actions reveal the true nature of a person's heart. This principle is especially important for believers, as our faith is not just something we talk about, it is something we live out. When our actions align with our values, they become a testimony of God's work in us. Rather than convincing others with words, we let our lives speak for us. Jesus emphasized this truth throughout his ministry. He did not only preach about love, compassion, and faith, he demonstrated them. He healed the sick, fed the hungry, and forgave sinners. His actions were a reflection of the heart of God. In Matthew 7:16, Jesus said, "You will recognize them by their fruits." This means that a person's true character is not determined by their words, but by their actions. We can claim to be kind, generous, or faithful, but if our actions do not reflect these qualities, our words mean nothing. James 2:17 reinforces this idea. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. A believer cannot simply speak about faith. They must live it out. A life of faith is demonstrated through obedience to God, acts of love, and perseverance through trials. When people see a life transformed by Christ, they are more likely to be drawn to him than if they only hear about him through words. The most powerful witness is not a loud voice, but a consistent life lived in righteousness. In relationships, actions matter far more than words. Anyone can say, "I love you," but true love is demonstrated through sacrifice, patience, and kindness. A parent shows love to their child not just by saying it, but by providing, guiding, and protecting them. A friend proves their loyalty not by promising to be there, but by actually showing up in times of need. Love, integrity, and faithfulness are not measured by speech. They are proven through action. Letting our actions speak louder than words also applies to how we respond to criticism or opposition. Many people waste energy trying to defend themselves with arguments or explanations, but the best response is often to simply live a life that reflects the truth. 1 Peter 2:15 says, "For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people." When people see genuine integrity, their words lose power. Over time, a consistent and honorable life will outweigh any false accusations or misunderstandings. Ultimately, actions have the power to inspire and transform. People remember how they were treated more than the words they heard. If we want to make a lasting impact, we must live in a way that aligns with God's will, reflecting His love, truth, and righteousness. When words fade, actions remain. A life lived with purpose and integrity will always speak louder than any words we could ever say. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and constant activity, hearing the voice of God requires stillness. Many people long to hear from God, to receive His direction, comfort, and wisdom, but they often search for His voice in the chaos of life. However, God does not compete with the noise. He speaks in the quiet places, in the moments of stillness, when our hearts are truly open to Him. The Bible gives us a powerful example of this in 1 Kings 19:11-12. The prophet Elijah, overwhelmed and discouraged, sought to hear from God. A mighty wind came, but God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake shook the ground, but God was not in the earthquake. After that, a great fire appeared, but God was not in the fire. Finally, there came a gentle whisper, a still, small voice, and that was where Elijah encountered God. This passage reveals a profound truth. God's voice is not always found in dramatic displays of power, but in the quiet moments when we truly seek Him. Stillness is not just the absence of noise. It is a posture of the heart. Many people live in a constant state of busyness, filling every moment with activity, entertainment, or conversation. But Psalm 46:10 commands us, "Be still and know that I am God." This verse teaches that knowing God, truly experiencing Him, requires stillness. When we quiet our thoughts, set aside our distractions, and focus on Him, we create space for His voice to be heard. Jesus Himself often withdrew to quiet places to pray. Mark 1:35 tells us, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where He prayed. If Jesus, the Son of God, needed stillness to commune with the Father, how much more do we? In the quiet moments, God strengthens us, renews our spirit, and reveals His will for our lives. One reason why stillness is so important is that God's voice is often subtle. Unlike the world, which shouts for attention, God whispers. His guidance often comes as an impression on the heart, a scripture that stands out, or a sense of peace about a decision. When our lives are too loud, we risk missing His direction. But when we slow down, we become more aware of His presence. Stillness is also an act of trust. It is easy to rely on our own strength, to try to figure out solutions on our own. But Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." When we learn to wait in stillness, we acknowledge that God is in control. We surrender our worries to Him and trust that He will speak at the right time. God is always speaking, but we must position ourselves to hear Him. When we embrace stillness, we discover that His voice is near, His guidance is clear, and His presence is more powerful than any noise the world can offer. The power of divine timing is one of the greatest mysteries of God's plan. As humans, we often desire immediate answers, quick results, and instant breakthroughs. However, God does not operate according to human schedules. He moves according to His perfect timing. Understanding divine timing requires faith, patience, and trust in God's wisdom, knowing that He is always working behind the scenes, even when we do not see it. Ecclesiastes 3:01 reminds us, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven." This verse teaches that God has appointed times for every event in our lives. Just as nature follows a cycle, spring for planting, summer for growth, autumn for harvest, and winter for rest, our lives also move through seasons. Some seasons are filled with opportunities, while others require waiting. Some are seasons of abundance, while others may feel like times of testing. But in each season, God's timing is at work, shaping us and preparing us for what is ahead. One of the greatest challenges of divine timing is waiting. Waiting can be difficult, especially when we do not understand why things are delayed. However, the Bible reassures us that waiting on God is never wasted time. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles." Waiting builds faith, strengthens character, and teaches us to rely on God rather than our own understanding. Often what seems like a delay is actually divine preparation. God is working in ways we cannot see, aligning circumstances, refining our hearts, and making sure we are ready for the blessing He has prepared. Joseph's story in the Bible is a powerful example of divine timing. He had a dream that he would become a ruler, but before that dream was fulfilled, he faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. For years it seemed as though his life was moving further from his destiny rather than closer to it. Yet, in God's perfect time, Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, and the very dream God had given him came to pass. Looking back, Joseph could see that every step, even the painful ones, was part of God's divine plan. Trusting in divine timing also means surrendering our control. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." When we let go of our desire to control the timing of events in our lives and instead submit to God's perfect plan, we experience peace. God is never late, nor is He early. He is always right on time. His timing is intentional, purposeful, and designed for our good. When we embrace divine timing, we no longer rush ahead in impatience or fall into discouragement during delays. Instead, we walk in faith, knowing that every moment is leading us closer to the fulfillment of His promises